Good afternoon. Welcome to Sports Nothing But Sports with Kent Sterling for Monday, November 4th, 2019. Brought to you by the great people at Today's Dentistry. Dr. Mike O'Neill is simply the best dentist that there is. Make an appointment. You're going to be very happy you did. I did it 25 years ago. I've never gone anyplace else. Going to Today's Dentistry is time well spent, time well invested. Now let's talk about sports. First, 317-849-2933. That's the number for Today's Dentistry. Okay, we thought that today on Sports Nothing But Sports, we'd be talking about the Colts, talking about the Pacers, maybe the football Hoosiers, maybe the basketball Hoosiers. You had the Colts lose yesterday to the Steelers. A lot of reasons for that loss. Laces out. Laces in, whatever. Darius Leonard, couple of personal fouls. You had the pick six thrown by Brian Hoyer, the injury to Jacoby Brissett. Lots to unpack and talk about with the Colts. Then with the Pacers. Nice win last night against the Chicago Bulls. Their third consecutive victory. Could have talked about that. The Hoosiers on Saturday night against Northwestern, they didn't just win, but they dominated the Wildcats, and they put themselves in a position to get an even better bowl. They've got 3 games remaining, a bye week this week. Lots to talk about with IU football. How about IU basketball? Opening up the season tomorrow night at Simon Scott Assembly Hall against Western Illinois. Lots to talk about, but then this morning, a bombshell. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway and Holman and Company has been sold to Roger Penske. Roger Penske is going to take over Holman and Company, all of the assets. He thinks that the timeline, all the stuff that's got to be done to make this work, it's going to be done by January. And so he's going to take over and he's going to figure out what's next for the property, for the Indianapolis 500, for IndyCar, all of those things, and all of the assets of Holman and Company. So today they had the press conference, and what we found out subsequent to the press conference afterward in my conversation with Tony George is that this was a decision made yesterday. They put all this together, had the media availability at 11 o'clock this morning, and talked about what's going to go on. Roger Penske hasn't even walked the property yet. All right, 6 weeks ago, Tony George decided, and his family, that they were going to seek a buyer for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and all the assets of the family. They called Roger Penske or sent him an email. Roger Penske has the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in his blood. He loves the place. He first visited in 1951 at the age of 14. Loves it, and that means a lot to the Holman George family. So they pulled the trigger on the deal yesterday. Roger Penske in town today making the announcement. How smart is that? Really smart. You don't want something to leak. You try to shorten the amount of time between decision being made and the decision being announced, and that's exactly what happened. So Roger Penske announced as the guy who is going to run the show at the age of 82, but I got to tell you, for an 82-year-old guy, Roger Penske is sharp as a tack, physically fit. He appears to be a guy about 25 years younger than that. I think this is a great move for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, for the Holman George family, for Roger Penske, because as is the case with all family-run enterprises, and that's what the Indianapolis 500 is. For those of you who don't know, that's the Holman George family's show. They own every aspect of that deal. They have never sought minority investors for that property. They own it lock, stock, and barrel. So it's kind of like a family barbecue with 300,000 attendees who all bring coolers, a lot of tradition. The first Indy 500 run in 1911, about $100 million worth of improvements made over the last 4 or 5 years. We spent some time earlier today with Tony George, the chairman of Holman and Company. Let's hear what Tony George had to say about the emotional aspect of selling that thing that really defines his family in the minds of Hoosiers, in the minds of race fans around the world. Tony, when I heard you in the media center and you're talking about how this was emotional for you, and clearly it was, it reminded me kind of when my grandmother sold her house, or we had to sell our grandmother's house. And that's what this place is, isn't it? This is your grandfather and grandmother's house.
Well, I guess if you look at it that way, it's really the people's house. I mean, it's everybody's house. I know for a fact that he considered himself a steward. When he took the decision to purchase the Speedway against the advice of his wife and mother, by the way.
Is that right?
He took a risk. Earlier, Roger talked about sometimes, if you don't take the risk, there's no reward. And he took the risk. He was genuinely rewarded and credited with saving the institution. We've been able to maintain it and grow it to this point, but we've really taken it about as far as we can take it, and we all feel good about passing the baton to Roger and his organization and his family, because with their structure, with their capabilities, with their resources, I mean, it's going to be special. And there'll be people who are excited by this day. There'll be people who are saddened by this day, but they're entitled to their own emotions and their feelings. But I guarantee you they'll all be back here in May when the track opens. So
the sale of this place, at what point did you make the decision, or did you and your family make the decision this had to happen?
Well, we made the decision yesterday.
Is that right?
Yeah, but I mean, we've been looking at and pursuing it for the last 6 weeks, but we finally made the decision yesterday.
Wow, this came together quick.
Well, yeah, reasonably quick, and it was in the spring after we announced the sale of Clabber Girl that there was some more outreach and interest expressed in discussion, so we pursued that through a liaison committee of the board. But we got pretty far down the road with a couple of interested parties, and kind of got to a decision point, and the family felt strongly about including Roger, if there's going to be a process, including Roger in that process. And I mean, the beauty of this is Roger didn't need to think about it. Yeah. He's in command of his own feelings and his clearly when I approached him with the opportunity, and Mark and I were sitting there, immediately he saw the wheels spinning, and just a stream of consciousness started to flow, and he was engaged from that moment. Over the course of the next 10 days, he went to a race weekend, he flew over to Europe, he came back, debriefed, got on another plane, went to Asia and Australia, all the while staying in touch with our team and his team, bringing this thing together. But that's the kind of guy he is. And, as emotional as it has been, I'm excited for the man, and I'm excited he has offered an opportunity for us to continue to be involved. Not that I didn't think he would or expect he would, but, we just want to support him. We don't have to be involved. We would like to just, continue to create our own memories here. And I have one memory. As great as this has been, I still want to visit Victory Lane as a co-owner of an entry, and I would love to do that in 2020. So
there's still work to be done.
There's still a lot of work to be done.
All right, that's Tony George. You heard it right from him. Very emotional today. Broke down a couple of times during the press conference. And you know what? A guy who I think has done great work in being the steward, and that word has been mentioned by Roger Penske or Tony George or Mark Miles about 65 times today. You don't own the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You are the steward of that property and of that event. So what does it all mean? Let's talk to Kevin Lee. Does a great job with NBC Sports, has covered the Indianapolis 500 for the last quarter century or more. What does Kevin Lee think?
I think ultimately, after you get through the shock, it's a good thing. It's sad, and most of us don't really like change, but if the Speedway was ever going to be sold, if you could say, who would you like to buy it, you'd start and maybe even end with Roger Penske. So this is a good thing.
He's got the resources to make it better, and he's got a critical eye and such a disciplined eye. When you talk to him about business, I don't know whether I've ever talked to a guy smarter about business than Roger Penske.
This is not just someone adding to their portfolio. As exciting as it might be if Apple or Amazon bought IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, they don't have the same interests that we do as Indianapolis citizens and fans of the Indy 500. So Roger doesn't just donate his money, but this might be a situation where when he heard, okay, this is for sale, I need to buy it to make sure that someone else that doesn't have the best interests of the history of this place and the future of this place in mind, and now that I have it, okay, here's some things that I'd like to see us try.
You know what's interesting to me is that he's 82 years old, and it's hard to kind of wrap your arms around him being 82 because he's unbelievably sharp, and he still looks roughly the same as like when he was in the 70s running Mark Donohue out here, for God's sake. It seems like he's still a forward-thinking guy, even at 82, and that's good things.
His mind is far sharper than mine has ever been or ever be, and I think the 2 times where I've actually gone to the gym at a race weekend before going to the track, like at 6:30 in the morning, who's on the treadmill?
Is that right?
It's Roger Penske. So there's a reason why he is what he is.
The takeaway from, or whatever takeaways there are from the press availability, it seems like there's going to be a 24-hour race here somehow, some way, that he, ironically, would not be interested necessarily in a full light package. He said that there might be ways to invest better. What did you get out of this?
Well, you don't have to have lights to do a 24-hour race. Maybe that's what he's talking about, that just because you do a 24-hour race, for example, all of the course at Daytona is not lit up. Sebring, where they run at night, and Road Atlanta, it's dark. And it's the headlights on the cars and the glowing lights. It's sketchy. You can't see what's going on. So you don't have to have the entire place lit to run a road race. You would need more lights as far as spectators and just being able to see your way around. So I don't think it's a lock that there's a 24-hour race, but I think what he's saying is we're going to revisit this. Things like this have been brought up before. Lights have been brought up before. It wouldn't necessarily be, and I think it's unlikely to be for the Indianapolis 500, but would you run the NASCAR race at night? Would that help you in a 24-hour race? Would you consider running an IndyCar race on a Saturday night in September under the lights? Those are things that have been talked about before, and then you get into a lot of cons about that, but they'll weigh all of those things and discuss whether it makes sense.
Do the people around here, they got a reason to be nervous tomorrow when he's walking the facility?
The people that work here?
Yeah.
Well, so just my own ways of being afraid of everything. Anytime a new owner comes in, you're going to get worried. I mean, let's face it, when the person that hired you no longer has the ultimate say, you get worried a little bit. But I
sometimes rightly so.
Correct, sometimes rightly so. But I think ultimately what he says is we don't have a gymnasium full of people coming in. We're going to start with the people that are here. Will there be some changes? Yeah, probably. But significant? My guess is no. And I know this. He does, from everything I hear, he and the other IndyCar owners like Mark Miles, Jay Fry, the people in charge of running IndyCar, and they like the people at IMS. So I think it's very possible there are very minimal changes.
That's Kevin Lee of NBC Sports. When I want perspective, who do we go to? We go to the great Bob Kravitz of The Athletic. All right, Bob, we're sitting here at the IMS, and it's going to have a new steward. They keep talking about stewardship, and it's going to be Roger Penske. What the hell does this mean to race fans, the facility, the company? What's going on?
I think it's going to be a good thing. First of all, anytime you get Roger Penske involved in anything, you could have him involved in the baby races at halftime at the Pacers game, and he would make it better. Right. He is a fabulous businessman. Nobody knows the sport better than he does. I do have some questions about the potential conflicts of interest, but keep in mind, Tony George also had teams running here while he was the steward, while he ran the show. Of course, Penske's teams win every year, so that might become a bit more of an issue, but based on the reaction I've seen from around the racing community, everybody seems to think this is a really good thing.
When it's not like there's some pirate coming in who's going to strip the property bare and sell off the parts and
it's
not
kind of like journalism. That's exactly right. He's going to put the money into it. Clearly, we do see, as you mentioned, a lot of these companies come in and they just want to sell you off for parts. Clearly, this is a guy who was dropped off here in 1951 as a 14-year-old and fell in love with the sport. And we see how much he's put heart, soul, and finances into this sport over the years. And so I think they're in really good hands with Roger.
And you talked about this a little bit, and we've both been around guys and been around him, guys who own stuff, and how disciplined they are in their behavior. And he mentioned it in the press conference, how prudent he's going to be, likes to work in top tens, and just kind of, crawl before you walk and walk before you run, and seems like a guy who is uniquely positioned to do this at a really high level.
Oh, there's no question. I go back to the Super Bowl in Detroit many years ago, and the reaction heading into that was a little bit like Indianapolis, like, oh, God, what are we doing here in Detroit in the middle of January? And that thing ran like clockwork. You know who was in charge of that? Roger Penske. And Roger literally would get up every morning with his driver and drive around Detroit and say, we need to do this, we need to put a plant here. So he's good at the macro stuff, but he's good at the micro stuff too. And his hand touches everything, and I think he's going to be a great steward for this place.
Well, and he said that the first thing he's going to do is tomorrow he's going to take a walk over the entire property. How nervous do you think people who have been here a long time are that walk and his examination of the internal processes of this deal?
Well, there's got to be a lot of people who are putting out resumes or who are taking a good hard look at their future employment opportunities, because, look, I don't know what Roger's going to do. I know that he's got like about an 80% retention rate in terms of people that he's hired. He engenders great loyalty, but whether he's going to find everybody who's already here up to snuff, I don't know. Anytime a new person comes in, as we both know, things can change rather markedly.
We do have experience with that.
Yes, we do.
The race, positive momentum. I wonder what he thought when he got that email from Tony, as Tony described it, like kind of an offer, a solicitation. Would you like to buy this place that means so much to him? He's not a very emotional guy, it doesn't seem. I wonder what those emotions were.
Well, I think what Tony said was really true. He said, we've taken this as far as we can. And, I think, Tony said a very mixed bag in terms of his legacy. I think he's done some good things. Obviously, the split was not a good thing. But I think they've taken another step in their progression. I think that Roger's going to be he's been great for this sport, for all motorsports for, 50 years or whatever. And I see no reason to think that he's not going to try some interesting new things. I don't see lights being an option, but I could certainly see a different way of doing the road course. I can see a different way, different rules for qualifying, because they're changing every year. Nobody can keep up. They need to establish something. I think it's going to be good for this whole group.
He's got the resources to get it done, and you're right about lights, and he almost said that.
Yeah.
Right? There's a better way to spend money and get a bigger return.
Didn't he? He was talking. Did he talk F1?
Yeah, you mentioned F1.
He mentioned F1.
And a 24-hour race.
24-hour race. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Look, nobody's got more juice in that sport than this guy. And if he wants to get something done, generally speaking, he gets it done.
Are you surprised that it stayed quiet? Like, this is a big story, not just in Indianapolis, but throughout motorsports. And they really kind of I was stunned this morning when I heard it.
I was too. Now, I don't want to give you the wrong idea. Like, I'm loaded with inside sources on motorsports, not my area of great expertise. But they did a pretty good job of keeping it on the down low. Absolutely. And it's one of those things where Roger may have said, we have to keep this on the down low or this thing's going to blow up.
Yeah.
You remember John Lynch, the 49ers, that was one of his tests of Jed York, the owner of the 49ers, is this guy capable of keeping my hiring quiet until the day comes? And he did. And so I think it's important. It was important probably to Roger and to everybody else to keep this thing pretty low-key.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome, bud.
All right, that's a great Bob Kravitz from The Athletic. Big news today, huge news, really. Life-changing news. It's been 74 years since that property has changed hands. It's migrated, the ownership has migrated from generation to generation to generation within the Holman George family, and it's going to be different out there. And Roger Penske is going to figure out, number one, how to maintain that event and the traditions of that event. But what he's also going to do is he's going to update it and upgrade it. He's got a lot of money, and he understands how to use money to make money. And that's what's going to happen at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and with Holman & Company. And it's going to be fun to watch how this thing evolves moving forward. You heard Tony George say it a little bit ago. He thought that the family had taken the event and the property about as far as they could get it to go. Now you've got Roger Penske, who is one of those guys, and I've spent time with Roger Penske, and he's a fascinating guy, a very, very smart guy, but there are two things that really define him. His ability to focus without distraction, and his ability to absolutely trust his employees, hire people that he covets, make them happy, keep them as employees. Does anybody ever leave Penske? Frankly, nobody ever leaves Penske. Very, very seldom do people, they just retire out of it. Nobody quits in a huff. Nobody thinks, well, the old man's crazy. None of that stuff. He's a process-oriented guy. He understands how to make money. He has been the guy at the vanguard of using racing as a marketing wing for his primary business in a way that was absolutely breathtakingly innovative back 50 years ago, and he's still doing it, and he's still showing people exactly how that needs to be done. Great guy. You ever get a chance to spend any time with Roger Penske, absolutely do that. And we're going to get a whole bunch of opportunities to do that moving forward. He's going to be down here a lot, he said, coming down from Detroit. He's going to walk the property tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, things better be kind of buttoned up because Roger Penske does not miss a trick. He will see every detail that is out of place, and he will have it corrected immediately, and he will hold accountable those who are in charge that didn't have it corrected. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500 under Roger Penske, the I's will be dotted, the T's will be crossed, and I really think that it's a fantastic thing for the series and as well for the event and the property. And that, you know what, I think that Tony George, though, did a great job. I think he was a wonderful steward of all of what the Indy 500 is and what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is. I don't think it would exist today in the same form, and I think the entire city of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana, and the world of racing owes Tony George a tremendous debt. Tomorrow morning, Breakfast with Kent, a little bit more about this, but we'll get back to talking about the Pacers, who are at Charlotte tomorrow night, the Hoosiers, who welcome the Leathernecks of Western Illinois to Simon Scott Assembly Hall. We'll talk about all that stuff tomorrow morning. Facebook Live at 8, Periscope Live at about 8:15, brought to you by the great people at Today's Dentistry, 317-849-2933. We will talk to you tomorrow morning. Join us.